You want me to put that on my Tudor?
This one's wife, he'll forget. This one's wife won't. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. As you will expect with the imminent publication of Bell Endgame by the improbably named plastic-faced lieutenant Omid Scobie, there are advanced copies in circulation which various newspapers are distilling the essence of and writing about. This provides us with quite a wealth of material with regard to what is being stated in Bell Endgame, the reaction to it, and also the dynamics of the issuing of these allegations by Omid Scobie for and on behalf of the Sussexes, despite his completely laughable denials that he's their mouthpiece. We commence with a piece that appears in the Telegraph, written by Victoria Ward, which has the headline, Prince Harry, ready to forget royal row, but this one's wife refuses, says Newbuck. The Duke of Sussex is ready to put the bitter feud with his family behind him and move on, but the Duchess of Sussex refuses to have anything to do with them, a Newbuck has claimed. Now, naturally, you should all have to hand a large pinch of salt when it comes to what Omid Scobie has to write. Why? He is an unreliable narrator for reasons which will become apparent when I move into other videos where he talks about aspects of himself which are so laughingly false that you would perhaps struggle to remain upright whilst reading them. Furthermore, we all know that he is the lieutenant of this one's wife, who sees the world differently through the distortion field which is her narcissism. That what everybody else understands as the majority truth she does not subscribe to, because her narcissism skews it in order to enable her to be the eternal victim and pursue the prime aims. What everybody else understands as the truth, she is a stranger to it, and that view, of course, is provided to Omid Scobie. If there is anybody who believes that she has not had a hand in Bell Endgame, then you need to go and stick your head in the freezer and cool your brain off, because quite simply, it's evidently the case that she would do. First of all, her sticky mitts were all over funding freedom finding dollars, that piece of excrement that Scobie first wrote with the shamed and in hiding Carolyn Durant. Secondly, the content of Spare similarly had the fingerprints of this one's wife all over it. And it simply is not credible that she would not have any involvement in this publication of Bell Endgame, because, 1, we know Scobie's a lieutenant and therefore she will use him to put forward her narrative. 2, the only two people who don't get a panning in this book are, funnily enough, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which tends to suggest that Scobie is writing on their behalf and he doesn't want to offend them. Thirdly, this one's wife cannot resist the opportunity to smear other individuals because she's driven by her narcissism to do so. It's an instinctive response that she has, similar to when you drink some fizzy pop and you need to burp. When her need for control is threatened, one of the ways that she will respond is to smear. And Scobie, as the loyal lieutenant, with his nose wedged firmly up her backside, is too useful a conduit for her narrative, and therefore it's evident that this is just a piece of propaganda that is being launched by the Sussexes through Scobie. But let's dive into the article. The fact is that Prince Harry is willing to put the feud behind him, it would appear, which is demonstrative of the emotional empathy that he has for his family. The fact that, whilst of course he's heavily swayed by his wife's manipulations, he still has an essence of concern for the family members and just decides, well, that's enough. But for this one's wife, she won't. The reason being is that each time the royal family comes up on her radar, their presence threatens her sense of control. The issue then is she has to nullify that threat to control. She can't do so directly because they will just ignore her. The Prince and Princess of Wales, King Charles, etc., all know that the best way to deal with this one's wife is to ignore her, to not interact with her, to not talk to her or about her. Accordingly, her narcissism realizes that any direct approach by her, a Hoover, will fail, and she'll be wounded, and the narcissism as a self-defense mechanism will not move her to do that. Instead, it causes her to either smear or jettison the thought about them by staying in a position of withdrawal. But what it won't allow her to do is move on. Not that she sits there each day grinding her teeth about the treatment that she believes that she has suffered from at their hands. No, it's only relevant when they come up on her radar, but when they do, they're patently not under control. And immediately, her response isn't one of reconciliation, but remains a warlike setting because they're painted black. Author, and I use that in the most elastic of the senses, Omid Scobie alleged that Prince Harry, 39, has abandoned his demand for an apology from the royal family for perceived slights that has blighted his life. His new book, Bell Endgame, Inside the Royal Family and the Monarchy's Fight for Survival, quotes the Duke as saying, "I'm ready to forget. Get an apology or explanation. At this point, who cares, right?" It comes after Prince Harry contacted his father, the King, when he turned 75 earlier this month, dependent on whether you believe that or not, and sent videos of his children, Prince Archie, 4, and Princess Lilibet, 2, singing Happy Birthday. See parts passing for an analysis of that. But Scobie claims that conversely, the Duchess of Sussex had moved on and would not be extending such olive branches. This one's wife, 42, refuses to dive back into the soap opera, he writes in extracts published in Paris Match magazine. Now, hilariously, note the hypocrisy there, that this one's wife refuses to dive back into the soap opera, when, of course, what is her life but a soap opera? Once again, the complete inability to recognise the way that she behaves and projecting it onto other people instead. The book suggests that only Prince Edward was worried about the state of his nephew's mental health and alleges that it was the Princess Royal who persuaded the King to evict the Sussexes from Frogmore Cottage, their home on the Windsor estate. That might be correct. After all, as a normal, the Princess Royal doesn't want to stand for any nonsense that comes from the Sussexes. When the news came in January, Prince Harry is said to have pleaded with the King, "You don't want to see your grandchildren anymore." That, of course, is symptomatic of the manipulative, short-term thinking that Harry has been imbued with by his wife. Just because there isn't a place to stay doesn't mean that they can't come and visit. It's not as if King Charles is short on rooms, is it? But that's the knee-jerk reaction that you get from Prince Harry. "Oh, you're kicking us out of there, that means we haven't got anywhere to stay. That must mean you don't want to see your grandchildren." Twisted logic. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales, 41, who has not spoken to the Duchess since 2019, very sensible, had always considered her sister-in-law a rival, Scobie suggests. Well, of course, Scobie wants to play up to that because his job is to paint the Princess of Wales as some form of wicked witch, a skinny, preening, vain individual who felt threatened by the presence of this one's wife, which simply doesn't stack up with facts. Having better legs, dressing better, having been more established within the royal family, and also the person that's going to be queen, unlike this one's wife, why on earth would the Princess of Wales feel that this one's wife is a rival? The only rivalry, of course, is that which is generated by this one's wife's envy of the Princess of Wales, and, of course, newspapers and magazines that utilise it as a selling point to pitch one duchess against the then duchess. Scobie goes on to state, "She spent more time talking about this one's wife than with this one's wife," a close friend is quoted as saying. I suspect that's made up. Every time she hears about this one's wife, Kate shudders, that's probably accurate, and giggles. The book states that when Prince Harry did make contact, the king was cautious about speaking to his younger son. Well, that's hardly a surprise. Naturally, the king, also needing to assert control, would be wary of the fact that his son represents a threat to control. He wanted to limit their discussion to a harmless exchange, it says. Concerning Harry, the message that circulated in the family was not to trust him. Everyone took it very seriously, and it's hugely understandable that that would be the case. After all, Harry and this one's wife have repeatedly told lies about other people. However, Scobie reserves much of his wrath for the Prince of Wales, whom he depicts as cold and hungry for power. He says it was Prince William, 41, who orchestrated the downfall of his uncle, the Duke of York, at the height of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, and who was able to convince his grandmother, Elizabeth II, of punishing her favourite son. Although, why that would benefit Prince William to do that, it's not like his uncle's in his way with regard to the throne, and moreover, Scobie doesn't provide any evidence in support of this. Meanwhile, the king could not bring himself to hurt his brother. He was in tears because he was afraid for Andrew's mental health, Scobie writes. Charles leads with his head and his heart. William is colder. He wants the job done, and he has no problem with casualties along the way. This, of course, is all speculation by Scobie, who will have no sources that he can utilise within the royal family. Why? Well, all of the individuals there know Scobie's not to be trusted, and therefore this is pure conjecture on his part. The book claims that the Prince of Wales is impatient to become king. The Prince of Wales can't wait to ascend a throne, he says. Scobie's first book, Finding Freedom, co-written by the now in hiding and utterly embarrassed Caroline Durant, made sweeping personal revelations about the Sussexes' private lives. The Duchess was forced to admit during her High Court privacy claim against Associated Newspapers that she had authorised an aide to brief the authors for the book. A simple reading of that piece of nonsense shows that it might as well be retitled The Diaries of This One's Wife. The author has warned that Bell Endgame will reveal moments that the royal family should be ashamed of, and described himself as one of few journalists writing about the royal family whose work was impartial and spin-free. What a load of utter bollocks. He is the propaganda agent. He is the lieutenant of this one's wife. He is there to tell what she wants to tell. And it demonstrates his own hypocrisy by suggesting that his work was impartial and spin-free. Bell Endgame takes potshots at the king, at Camilla, at the Prince and Princess of Wales, and others besides, but doesn't at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, despite the fact that they have a list of behaviours which would stretch the moon and back several times, demonstrating the revision of history, the telling of lies, hypocrisy, and so forth. And yet, Scobie doesn't focus on any of it. It demonstrates that not only is he an individual that lacks any kind of credibility, but it's patently clear that he is utilised as a lieutenant of this one's wife. His role is to pump out the propaganda on her behalf in order to smear members of the royal family, giving her that subconscious sense of control over them. And undoubtedly, there'll be plenty more to come, which I shall be examining. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.